I never thought I would become the kind of man who installed security cameras in every corner of his home, but here I was, 66 years old, sipping coffee while staring at my phone screen. The live feed showed my daughter-in-law Amy on the porch of my new house on Maplewood Lane, jiggling a shiny key in the lock. She tried once, twice, then a third time. Her face scrunched into frustration as the door refused to budge. The day before, I had replaced every single lock. The locksmith's bill had been more than $5,000, but it felt like the best money I had ever spent. Watching Amy's confusion now was worth 10 times that. I leaned back in my chair, feeling both sorrow and grim satisfaction. This was not how I imagined the golden years of my life would unfold. After losing my wife Joyce last winter, I thought the worst pain I would face was loneliness. Instead, I was learning that betrayal by your own flesh and blood can cut deeper than any graveyard silence. Amy stepped back from the door, pulling out her phone. On my screen, I watched her pacing, gesturing angrily, her lips forming words I could not hear. Then she tried the back door, rattling it in frustration. The new deadbolt held firm. She shook her head, clearly confused that her secret key no longer worked. For weeks, I had suspected that Amy and my son Jose were not being entirely honest with me. At first, it was just little things, carefully worded suggestions about how I should use the life insurance payout after Joyce's passing. "Dad," Jose had said, patting my shoulder, "you shouldn't live all alone in that old place. Mom would want you to have something fresh, something big enough for everyone." Amy nodded, her eyes glimmering in that way I used to mistake for kindness. I wanted to believe them, I really did. Grief does strange things to a man. When Joyce died, I was left with $1.2 million from her policy. Instead of feeling secure, I felt unmoored. My son and his wife seemed so eager to help me make decisions. I thought they were showing love. But standing in my new kitchen now, coffee warming my hands, I knew better. The security company had installed cameras at every entrance the previous afternoon. Another $7,000 added to the bill, but again, worth every penny. The footage was clear as daylight. Amy had come here believing she held control, that the house was already within her grasp. She had no idea that I owned it outright, purchased in cash through a trust, and that I was fully aware of her scheming. My phone buzzed. It was Jose. "Dad," he said, his voice careful, almost rehearsed. "The strangest thing happened. Amy drove by that house we looked at, and she thinks someone might have changed the locks. Maybe squatters, maybe vandalism. She's just worried." I nearly laughed. Why would Amy be checking on a house we supposedly did not own, and why would she have a key in the first place? "Jose," I said slowly, "how exactly did Amy get a key to that house?" Silence stretched across the line. Then he stammered, "What key?" I tapped my screen, watching Amy pace on the porch, the camera catching every frustrated gesture. "The key she tried this morning. I saw her with my own eyes." He swallowed hard, the sound sharp even over the phone. "Dad, what cameras?" "The ones I had installed yesterday," I replied. "On my house. The house I bought 6 weeks ago with your mother's insurance money." Another silence, heavier this time. I could picture Jose rubbing his forehead, realizing the jig was up. "That's right," I continued, my voice calm. "The deed is in my name. The trust is in place. Every marble countertop, every oak floorboard, every inch of that yard belongs to me. And I have cameras recording every attempt to take it from me." On the porch feed, Amy threw up her hands and stormed off toward her car. My coffee had gone lukewarm, but my resolve had never been warmer. I should have been hosting my son and his wife for a joyful meal, revealing the home as a gift, a fresh start after Joyce's death. Instead, I was preparing for a battle I never wanted, but could no longer avoid. I whispered to myself, "If they think they can steal my future, they are about to learn otherwise." Because sometimes the only way to protect the love you once shared is to draw a line so sharp it cannot be crossed. The church bells had barely stopped ringing when the quiet settled in. After Joyce's funeral, my house felt emptier than it ever had. The pictures on the mantel, the faint scent of her lavender lotion in the bedroom, even the garden she had loved, all of it reminded me she was gone. I had been married to her for more than 40 years. Losing her was not just losing a partner. It was losing my anchor. In the first weeks, I stumbled through each day in a fog. People from church stopped by with casseroles. Neighbors offered sympathy, but the evenings were unbearable. That was when the phone calls from Jose and Amy began. At first, their concern seemed genuine. Jose called every night around 7. "Dad, how are you holding up? Have you eaten dinner? Do you want me to come by?" His voice carried the kind of tenderness I had not heard since he was a boy. Amy chimed in with messages full of empathy. "We're worried about you," she wrote, adding little hearts and smiley faces. I wanted to believe them. Loneliness makes a man cling to any sign of affection. Yet soon, their words shifted. Concern about my health turned into questions about my living arrangements. "Dad, that old house must feel huge now," Jose said one evening. "Too many memories, too many empty rooms." Amy added, "It might not be safe for you to live alone. Have you thought about something newer, with better security?" The conversation always circled back to money. One night over dinner, Jose leaned across the table, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. "Dad, Mom had that life insurance policy, right? It must have been a real blessing." I nodded. Joyce had been practical to the end. She left behind $1.2 million, a cushion she wanted to make sure would protect me. Amy's eyes sparkled. "That's wonderful. You could invest in something solid, like real estate. A place big enough for everyone. We could even help you find it." I brushed off the idea at first. Your mother's money was meant for security, not for taking risks. But they persisted. Amy had a way of speaking that sounded like care but felt like pressure. "Think about it, Henry. A spacious home where you would never have to be alone. A fresh start, just what Joyce would have wanted." I stared at her across the table, wondering how she could claim to know Joyce's wishes better than I did. Joyce had always told me to live within my means, to keep things simple. She had grown up during lean years and believed in saving, not splurging. Still, the thought gnawed at me. The house I lived in was quiet, full of memories that stung. Perhaps a change of scenery could help. That was when Jose showed me a listing on his phone, a sprawling colonial revival property on Maplewood Lane. 7 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, wraparound porch, and a backyard big enough for family barbecues. "It's perfect," Amy said, sliding the phone toward me. "Plenty of space for us, and even room for my parents. You wouldn't have to worry about being alone anymore. We'd all be together." Her words landed heavy. I wanted to see my grandchildren more often, wanted family around. Maybe this was the answer, but a voice inside whispered caution. I remembered Joyce's steady advice. "Protect yourself, Henry. Love is strong, but boundaries are stronger." When I mentioned the cost, Amy waved her hand. "That's the beauty of it. You have the funds from the policy. Real estate is an investment, not an expense. Prices are only going up," Jose added quickly. "We could handle the upkeep. You'd just have to write the check. It would give you purpose, Dad." I sat back, staring at the listing. The asking price was nearly $1 million. A fortune, but not beyond what Joyce had left me. For a moment, I let myself imagine it. Christmas dinners in a grand dining room, my grandchildren running through wide halls, laughter echoing again. Yet Amy's eyes lingered too long on the number at the bottom of the screen. Her smile was a little too eager. The warmth I wanted to feel turned cold. I told them I would think about it. That night, alone in my quiet house, I opened Joyce's old cedar box where she kept important papers. Inside was a letter she had written years earlier, just in case the unthinkable happened. In her neat handwriting she reminded me, "Do not let grief make you reckless. Our savings are meant for your peace of mind, not for anyone else's ambition." I closed the box and sat in silence, the weight of her words anchoring me again. Jose and Amy wanted me to believe they were looking out for me. Maybe they even believed it themselves. But I could feel the tide pulling in another direction. This was no longer just about my well-being. It was about my money, and the house they imagined building with it. I finished my tea and looked out at the empty driveway. For the first time since Joyce's death, I sensed that the real danger ahead was not loneliness. It was misplaced trust. The first time I saw the house on Maplewood Lane, I felt something stir in me that grief had smothered for months. I had been driving aimlessly, just to escape the walls of my too-quiet home, when a for sale sign caught my eye. The colonial revival stood tall and proud, white columns rising against the late afternoon sun, a broad porch wrapping around like open arms. It had 7 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, and a garage large enough for 3 cars. Even from the street, I could picture grandchildren chasing each other across the lawn, Joyce's laughter echoing from the kitchen she never got to see. I parked across the road, just to look. The listing sheet in the box out front told me the price, $980,000. My breath caught, not from the number itself. I had the funds, thanks to Joyce, but from the audacity of even considering it. Still, something inside whispered that this house was meant for me. Maybe grief makes a man chase symbols of permanence. Maybe it was intuition. Whatever it was, I called the realtor listed on the sign the very next morning. "Mr. Carter," she said politely, "properties like this move fast. Do you want to schedule a showing?" "Yes," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "But I'd like to do it quietly. No family involvement just yet." By the end of the week, I had walked through every room. The marble countertops gleamed, though the cabinets needed updating. The hardwood floors creaked with history, begging to be refinished. The backyard was a tangle of weeds, but I could imagine a patio where neighbors might gather. When the realtor mentioned that the sellers preferred a cash buyer and that a trust would simplify paperwork, I almost smiled. It was as though the house was waiting for me and only me. I signed documents under the name of the Carter Family Trust. With one transfer, nearly $1 million, I became the legal owner. Not Jose, not Amy, not anyone else, just me. That night I sat alone at my kitchen table, staring at the deed. Joyce's name was not there, but her presence filled the room. I whispered, "I hope I'm making you proud." Of course, the house was far from move-in ready. I hired a property management company, asking them to handle renovations while keeping my name out of casual conversation. "Discretion is key," I told them. "Not even my family should know yet." Over the next 6 weeks, contractors buzzed in and out of the Maplewood property like bees in a hive. New paint in warm earth tones replaced the faded wallpaper. The kitchen was gutted and rebuilt with granite counters, stainless steel appliances, and a farmhouse sink that would have made Joyce grin. The oak floors were sanded and polished until they glowed like honey. Outside, landscapers carved order out of chaos, planting maples and lilacs, trimming hedges, and laying fresh sod. The bills piled up quickly, $120,000 for the full transformation, but every penny felt like an investment, not just in property, but in dignity. I visited often, slipping in through the side door with keys only I possessed. Each time, I walked the halls in silence, imagining the reveal I planned. I pictured Jose's face when I handed him the keys. Amy's tears of joy when she realized they had a family home beyond their dreams. I even rehearsed the words in my head. "Your mother's gift is for all of us. This house is where we begin again." It was a fantasy of reconciliation, of mending what grief had torn. I told myself that Joyce would approve, that she would want me to use her legacy to keep the family together. But even as I pictured it, a shadow of doubt lingered. Amy's eyes, sharp and calculating, returned to my thoughts. Her voice insisting that real estate was the only smart move. Jose's careful tone, as though speaking to a fragile old man. Were they truly concerned about me, or only about what my money could buy for them. Still, I clung to hope. Maybe, if I gave them this gift, they would see me not as a wallet with gray hair, but as a father who wanted love in return. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the new maples, I stood on the porch with the fresh paint still carrying its scent. For a moment, I felt peace. The house was ready. My surprise was nearly complete. I locked the door behind me, unaware that the very secrecy protecting my dream would soon become the weapon Amy used to twist it into her scheme. I had planned the reveal carefully, down to the last detail. In my mind, it would be a moment of joy, not suspicion. I imagined Jose and Amy's smiles when I told them the house on Maplewood Lane was already ours. But life rarely follows the script we write in our heads. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday evening. Jose called, excitement bubbling in his voice. "Dad, you won't believe what we found. There's this incredible colonial revival listed not too far from your place. 7 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a massive porch perfect for everyone." My heart lurched. He was describing my house. I forced a calm tone. "That does sound impressive. Where is it?" "Maplewood Lane," he said. "Number 24. Amy and I are heading there tomorrow to meet the agent. You should come, Dad. You'll love it." After hanging up, I sat in silence. The coincidence was almost too sharp. Of all the houses in the city, they had stumbled upon mine. At first, I thought it was fate-proof that we were meant to share this home. But by the time I arrived at the showing the next day, that optimism had begun to crack. Amy was already there, standing in the front yard as though she owned the place. Her hands swept through the air as she gestured toward the porch, then the garden, speaking into her phone. "Yes, the master suite has great light, and the garden will be perfect for gatherings." She sounded like a hostess giving a tour, not a buyer considering an option. Jose spotted me and waved eagerly. "Dad, come on. Wait until you see the kitchen." I followed them inside, my chest tight, with a mixture of pride and unease. The renovations gleamed. Granite counters, refinished oak floors, fresh paint in every room. The work I had overseen in secret had turned the house into a dream. Amy ran her hand across the marble island. "Isn't it perfect? I can already picture hosting Thanksgiving here. And the master bedroom. Oh, Dad, you'll love it." She led me upstairs to the room I had chosen as my sanctuary. "This will be ours," she said matter-of-factly. "You could take the smaller room next to the guest bath. It's small but adequate. Small but adequate." The words rang in my ears like a gavel striking wood. The room I had picked for myself, the space meant to ease my grief, was being reassigned to me as if I were a boarder. Amy had already claimed the best, relegating me to the margins in a house I owned outright. Jose nodded enthusiastically. "It really is perfect, Dad. Plenty of space for everyone. Quiet neighborhood. You'd love the park down the street." I smiled weakly, but inside I was calculating. The inheritance money I would provide for their down payment would turn into their equity, their investment. Meanwhile, I would be tucked away in the smallest room, like an aging relative granted charity. As we walked back to the kitchen, Amy sighed. "The only challenge is that the sellers want cash, no financing allowed. Something about a trust situation. That means we'd need the full purchase price up front." Her voice carried disappointment, but her eyes sparkled, measuring my reaction. Jose jumped in. "Even with your help, Dad, we couldn't qualify for that kind of mortgage. We'd be talking about nearly $500,000 just for a down payment." $500,000. The figure hung in the air like smoke. Amy touched my arm gently. "It's so close to perfect. If only—" She trailed off, letting the silence work on me. In that moment, I had a choice. I could reveal the truth that the deed already bore my name and watch their faces light up with joy. Or I could wait, see how far they would go when they thought I was still holding the purse strings. I cleared my throat. What if we looked at something smaller, something more within reach? Amy's expression hardened. "Henry, This house is perfect for our needs. Joyce would have wanted us to use her money wisely, to invest in our family's future. This is exactly the kind of opportunity she would have encouraged. The manipulation struck like a blade. To invoke Joyce, the woman who had always counseled simplicity, frugality, and independence, it was a betrayal of her memory. "You're right," I said slowly, masking my anger. "Joyce would want us to make smart decisions. Let me think about this overnight." That evening, I sat in my old house staring at the property deed for Maplewood Lane. My name was printed clearly, the Carter Family Trust stamped in bold letters. I had been so excited to give Jose and Amy this gift. Now I was wondering if giving them anything at all would be a mistake. For the first time since Joyce's passing, grief gave way to suspicion. I realized that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones who see your vulnerability as opportunity. The very next morning, my phone rang before I had even poured my coffee. It was Jose. His voice was brisk, urgent, the way he used to sound when he was trying to talk me into letting him borrow the car in high school. "Dad," he said, "bad news. The realtor says another family is interested in the Maplewood house. They might put in an offer today. If we want a chance, we have to act fast." I stared at the phone, my coffee growing cold in my hand. The house was already mine. There could be no competing offers. Still, I kept my voice calm. "That is unfortunate, but rushing into something that expensive is not wise." Jose sighed heavily. "Dad, this is the perfect house for our family. Amy barely slept last night. We really believe this is our chance to build a future. But we need your help today. Full asking price, in cash. $500,000 for a down payment, maybe more for renovations. Their urgency was not about family, it was about money." "I will think about it," I said, and ended the call. The moment I hung up, I contacted Heather Collins at the property management company. "Heather," I told her, "I need you to relist the Maplewood property immediately. Same price, same terms. If anyone calls, tell them the previous offer fell through." She hesitated. "But Mr. Carter, you already own the house. Why relist it?" "Because I need to know just how far my family is willing to go," I replied. 2 hours later, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Jose, his voice full of triumph. "Great news, Dad. The other family's offer was rejected. The house is still available, but we need to move fast. If you are serious about helping us, we need to wire the money right away." I felt something cold settle in my chest. My son was lying to me outright, manufacturing urgency to push me into draining Joyce's legacy. "Jose," I said mildly, "if I am investing this much, I need to speak directly with the realtor." There was a pause, long enough for me to hear his uncertainty. Then, "Actually, Dad, Amy has already built a rapport with the agent. It might be better if she continues handling the communication." I shook my head, even though he could not see me. "If I am writing a check for nearly $500,000, I will speak with the realtor myself." The line went quiet. When he spoke again, his tone was clipped. "Fine, I will see what I can do." I hung up and leaned back in my chair, anger mixing with sorrow. How had we come to this? The boy I had raised to be honest and kind was now conspiring with his wife to manipulate me out of nearly everything I had. That evening, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from Amy. The sellers accepted another offer. We lost the house. I am devastated. We were so close to having space for my parents and giving you a place to be safe with us. I almost laughed aloud. It was a performance. A carefully crafted attempt to keep me emotionally tethered. But the house was not lost. It sat under my ownership, its deed safe in my desk drawer. I replied simply, "That is disappointing. I am sure something else will come along." Within an hour, Amy called. Her voice was thick with tears. "Henry, I am so sorry. I know how excited you were too. Jose told me you were looking forward to the garden and the big kitchen for holiday dinners." Interesting? I had never said those words. She was projecting what she thought I should feel, trying to weave me into her narrative. "These things happen," I said. "Sometimes offers fall through. We will see." Amy's persistence was remarkable. "If you are still interested in helping us, we can stay in contact with the agent. Maybe it will come back on the market." I gave a non-committal answer, then ended the call. Later that night, I sat in my old kitchen, the deed spread out on the table before me. My name clear, the trust ironclad. For weeks, I had imagined unveiling the house as a gift, a symbol of family unity. Now I saw the truth more plainly than ever. To them, I was not a father. I was a vault to be cracked open. The manipulation had grown from gentle nudges to outright lies, and I had decided it was time to stop imagining joyful reveals. It was time to prepare for war. The sun was just slipping below the rooftops when I turned onto Maplewood Lane to admire the house again. I often drove by quietly, just to reassure myself it was real that I, Henry Carter, owned this magnificent colonial with 7 bedrooms and 4 bathrooms. But that evening, what I saw in the driveway stopped me cold. Amy's car was parked out front. I eased my truck to the curb half a block away, my heart pounding. An unfamiliar woman stood beside Amy, listening intently as my daughter-in-law gestured toward the porch and the flower beds I had just paid landscapers to perfect. From where I sat, it looked exactly like a real estate tour. I watched in disbelief as Amy unlocked the front door with a key I had never given her. She held it confidently, sliding it into the lock, and ushered the woman inside. For 20 minutes, I sat gripping the steering wheel, fury boiling in my chest. Every room they stepped into was one I had chosen to restore with Joyce in mind. The marble counters, the polished oak floors, the new paint, all of it, funded by the policy she left me. And here was Amy, strolling through my home as if it were hers to offer. I called the property management company immediately. "Heather," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady, "has anyone contacted you for access to the Maplewood property?" "No, Mr. Carter," she replied. "You are the only one with keys. And the listing was pulled down last week, just as you requested." My throat went dry. "Then how does my daughter-in-law have a key?" Heather sounded puzzled. "That should be impossible." It was not impossible. It was happening before my eyes. I made a decision then and there. I drove straight home and called a locksmith. Within 2 hours, every lock on Maplewood Lane had been replaced. The bill was more than $5,000, but it felt like reclaiming my dignity. The next morning, I scheduled a security company to install cameras at every entrance, front, back, and even the side gate. Another $7,000, another blow to my savings, but worth every cent. I wanted evidence, not suspicions. By the following afternoon, the system was live. I sat in the living room, surrounded by moving boxes, testing the app on my phone. Crisp, high-definition images filled the screen. I could see the porch, the garden, even the sparkle of the brass door handle. And then, as if on cue, Amy appeared. The camera feed showed her marching up the steps, that same key clutched in her hand. She tried once, twice, 3 times. Nothing. Confusion spread across her face. She looked around, then walked briskly to the back door. Same result. On the screen, I watched her pull out her phone, her lips moving furiously as she called someone, Jose, no doubt. Her hands flew in frustration, stabbing the air toward the house that refused to yield. Minutes later, my phone rang. Jose's voice was too calm, forced. "Dad, the strangest thing happened. Amy drove by that house and thinks someone might have changed the locks. She's worried there could be squatters." I nearly laughed. Why would Amy be checking on a house we do not own? A pause. "She thought she saw broken windows," he offered weakly. "There are no broken windows," I said. "And Jose, how exactly did Amy get a key?" Another pause, longer this time. "What key?" "The one she just tried this morning. I saw her on the cameras." Silence. Then, carefully, "Dad, what cameras?" "The ones I had installed yesterday. On my house. The house I bought 6 weeks ago with your mother's insurance money." For a moment, I thought the line had gone dead. Then I heard a faint choking sound, Jose swallowing the truth he could no longer deny. On my screen, Amy continued pacing, jabbing her finger toward the door as if berating the lock itself. Her frustration mounted, but I felt oddly calm. The lies were collapsing, the facade crumbling. That evening, I sat in the dining room of Maplewood Lane, eating takeout Chinese food from paper cartons. The chandelier above me sparkled, the table gleamed, but I was alone. This was supposed to be a celebration dinner. My family gathered around, toasting a fresh start. Instead, it was just me and the quiet certainty that my son and his wife had crossed a line they could never uncross. I looked at the glowing camera feed on my phone, Amy's image, frozen mid-gesture. "You should not have had that key," I whispered. The battle had begun, and for once, I felt ready. Jose showed up at my door the next evening, looking like a man who had not slept. His shoulders sagged, and his eyes darted around the porch as though he expected neighbors to be listening. He carried none of his usual charm. "Dad," he said, voice low, "we need to talk." I let him inside, gesturing to the living room where boxes still sat unopened. He lowered himself onto a chair, running his hands over his face. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, quietly, Amy got the key from the property manager's assistant. "She told the girl she was your daughter-in-law and that you had asked her to check on renovations while you grieved." The assistant believed her. The explanation stung worse than silence. My son had known. Maybe he had not stolen the key himself, but he had stood by while Amy did it. So instead of speaking to me directly, I said, voice sharper than I intended, "You tried to manipulate me into paying for a house I already own." Jose winced. "It was Amy's idea. She thought you would get defensive if we confronted you. She believed if you thought it was our idea, you would feel better about helping." "Helping you buy a house from myself?" I asked. He put his head in his hands. "It sounds bad when you say it like that." "Because it is bad," I snapped. "It is called fraud, Jose." That was when I decided I needed professional advice. The next morning, I sat across from Ethan Myers, a sharp-eyed lawyer recommended by a neighbor. I laid out the story, the manipulation, the lies, the stolen key, the fake urgency about offers. Ethan listened without interrupting, taking careful notes. Finally, he folded his hands. "Mr. Carter, based on what you have described, your daughter-in-law may have committed identity theft by pretending to be your power of attorney with the bank. She may also be guilty of fraud and trespassing. If you want to press charges, we can prepare the documentation immediately." The words were heavy, even when spoken calmly. Identity theft, fraud, trespassing. I had hoped to keep this a family matter. Now it was something darker. "I am not ready to drag my own son into court," I admitted, "but I want everything documented. If this escalates, I need to be prepared." Ethan nodded. "Then we will start a file. Keep every message, every voicemail. Save footage from the cameras. And do not give them a cent." I agreed, though my heart ached. That evening, as if on cue, Amy appeared at my door. Her face was pale, her eyes ringed with exhaustion. She looked different, softer somehow, but I knew better than to trust appearances. "Henry," she said, stepping into the living room, "please, just the two of us. No lawyers, no games." Against my better judgment, I allowed it. She perched on the edge of the sofa, wringing her hands. "I am sorry. I handled everything wrong. When I found out about the house, I panicked. Jose and I are drowning financially. His business is failing. We are behind on rent. I thought if I could make it seem like your idea to help, you would feel better about it. I thought I was protecting your feelings." Her tone was full of contrition, but her logic twisted. Protecting me by lying, manipulating, Trespassing? You have been protecting nothing but your own interests, I said evenly. Her eyes filled with tears. There is something else. I just found out I am pregnant. The words hung in the air like smoke. Pregnant. It should have been joyous news, but the timing was too precise. The card had been played exactly when I was standing firm. Congratulations, I said quietly. But that does not excuse what you have done. Amy pressed on. Henry, with a baby coming, we need more space. Stress is bad for the pregnancy. This house is perfect. We can make it work for everyone. I folded my arms. Everyone? You mean you and Jose in the master suite, and me in the small room by the guest bath? She flinched. Then, after a long pause, she whispered the part that chilled me most. Eventually, I was going to suggest transferring the deed. My uncle is an accountant. He said if you give us the house now, instead of leaving it in your will, it will save thousands in estate taxes. And it would protect the property if you ever needed nursing home care. It would be better for everyone. The words cut like ice. Not just manipulation for money now, but a calculated plan to strip me of ownership entirely. I leaned forward, staring at her. Do you know what that is called, Amy? She blinked, caught off guard. A smart tax strategy? No, I said firmly. It is called elder financial abuse. For the first time, she looked truly shaken. 6 months later, the dining room on Maplewood Lane glowed with soft light. The polished oak table stretched wide, covered in dishes that smelled of garlic, rosemary, and fresh bread. Laughter filled the air, not the laughter of Jose or Amy, but of new friends. Gerald and Carol sat at one end, passing bowls of salad. Sharon, the widow from across the street, poured glasses of wine. At the other end, Willie and his wife Heather helped their 2 little ones spoon mashed potatoes onto plates. I had imagined my first dinner in this house very differently. For weeks after buying it, I pictured Jose carving turkey at the head of the table, Amy arranging flowers, my grandchildren running through the halls. But reality had carved another path. Tonight, the voices around me were not bound by blood but by kindness. Strangers had become neighbors, and neighbors had become family. Jose called me now on Sundays. Our conversations were awkward but honest. He apologized more than once, admitting he had allowed Amy's ambition to poison his judgment. I could hear regret in his voice. The weight of choices he could not undo. Amy was civil during the monthly visits when I saw their newborn daughter, my granddaughter. But I could see in her eyes that she still thought I had overreacted. To her, I had ruined a brilliant plan, rather than saved myself from ruin. I accepted polite distance. Forgiveness, I had learned, is not the same as forgetting, and it certainly is not the same as permission to repeat harm. One afternoon, Ethan Myers, my lawyer, called me into his office. He slid a folder across the desk. Mr. Carter, I thought you should know something. We did a little digging into Amy's background. What you experienced was not her first attempt at this sort of scheme. My stomach tightened. He opened the folder to reveal notes and public records. 5 years ago, her grandmother signed over her house to Amy's parents under very similar circumstances. Concern about maintenance, suggestions about tax benefits, pressure to move quickly for the family's good. Within 2 years, the grandmother was in a nursing home, and the house was sold immediately after her funeral. I sat back, chilled. The pattern was clear. This was not desperation. It was a learned behavior, repeated and perfected. I realized how close I had come to joining that chain of victims. Thank you, I told Ethan, closing the folder. Now I know what I am protecting myself from. That evening, I stood in the garden, watching the young maple trees sway gently. The landscapers had planted them in spring, and already their leaves reached higher, stretching toward the sky. I thought of Joyce then. She had always said boundaries were like fences. They did not shut people out. They simply marked where respect began. The next Sunday, Jose called again. Dad, Amy wanted me to ask if you would consider being guardian in our will if something ever happens to us. The irony made me pause. After months of trying to strip me of ownership, now they wanted me as the safeguard for their child. "I will consider it," I said carefully. "But only if Amy commits to family counseling and a financial literacy course. At least 1 year." Jose was quiet before answering. "She says that is unnecessary. She just wants a yes or no." I deleted the conversation. Some people never learn. As twilight settled, I lit candles on the dining table. Gerald raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he said warmly. We clinked glasses, and I felt something settle in my chest, peace, the kind that comes only after standing firm. I realized then that Joyce's final gift was not just the money that bought this house. It was the wisdom she left behind. Protect your dignity, set your boundaries, and never let love blind you to manipulation. The sound of children's laughter drifted through the hall, not from my bloodline but from neighbors' little ones chasing each other with toy cars. Strangely, it filled me with the same warmth. Family, I understood now, is not defined by who shares your last name. Family is defined by who respects your place at the table. And as I looked around at the faces glowing in the candlelight, I knew I had finally built a home worthy of the word.